this section, we're going to look at adding details. So we have our main block out done of this Sci-Fi Prop. Now we need to add these finer details. So with this object, I'll start on the back here and just show you the process in which we're going to use to create these splits in the actual prop itself. I'm going to use the select tool and edges, and I'm going to click, hold shift and double click to select the whole loop. Once I've done that, I'm going to spacebar, bevel, and then adjust the bevel size. It's a little bit large. So I'm going to put in a value here of 0.07 and say OK. Again, click OK. That gives me a row of polygons here that I can work with. Select the polygon tool, double click to select the row of polygons now. Spacebar and Smart Extrude. This will allow us to extrude that selected row of polygons. So here we can see that I have this little gizmo that's appeared on the Smart Extrude tool. If I left click on this little N symbol and drag to the left, it's going to extrude the selected polygons, in this case inwards. I release the mouse button and we'll just deselect and drop the selection so we can see the result of that operation. So what I'm going to do now is repeat this for all of those split lines that we can see in our design reference. Okay, so I've undone what I previously showed, and the reason for that is because I don't want to create each one individually. I want to do a group of them at the same time. I'm going to be focusing now on this area down here. I need to reproduce that with a selection. So I need to add some extra cuts to get these diagonal lines in that we can see here in the reference. To do that, I'm going to use the Add and Split tool. So I've got to make a decision now based on my reference where I'm going to add and split. So here, for example, I'm looking at this line here and I want this to go upwards to roughly this place to this point here. So I'm going to choose my Add and Split tool and add some splits to meet with this line and then hit Escape. Similarly, I'm going to move across now to this side. So I'm going to go from here down, Escape, and then add this extra section at the back part here. So I'll miss one edge, move over, and then bring this one back up again, like so. Now with those created, I can go in and start to select and bevel as we did in the previous video. However, we're not quite finished yet. I'm going to add some more cuts a little bit higher up for this section here. So here, I'm going to move across and I'm going to follow this line here, and then I'm going to move upwards and cut in this direction. And I'll just rotate my view and cut to here. Now I need to come back down again as my reference shows here. However, you can see that there's a small radii on the top of here. Now I'm not going to recreate a radii on this edge. What I will do now is add a point here and then cut to this part back down. And then the line continues along this row of edges here. Deselect. You'll notice now where I made those initial cuts on this side of the prop. I forgot to turn on the symmetry as I made those cuts. So one side is now different than the other. It's not a problem because all I need to do now is hit S on the keyboard, enable symmetry on the x-axis, and with this main layer selected here, come down and click on this icon. Once I left click on that icon and rotate the object around, you can see that those cuts have now been placed on the opposite side. Now one thing I'm going to do here on this particular edge here is put in a little bit of supporting edges for this edge here. So I'm just going to use the Add and Split tool here, click and just support that edge, and that should be fine. And now with those edges selected, which mimics the design that we have in the reference, I can go ahead now and click the spacebar, bevel, and put in a value of 0.07 and say OK. Now if we do that and we zoom in a little bit closer to this area here, we can see that we've got a slight problem here where our geometry buckles slightly here. So I'm going to need to manually correct that. So I'm going to do that using the slide vertex tool here. And I'm going to bring this edge down, move this one along, and move it down slightly. So I'm just looking here along this edge just to make sure that I've got something that's keeping fairly consistent with the other polygons. And here I need to move this one over. So I'm just checking the width of this bevel that I've created, making sure that it's reasonably consistent. That looks better. Next, I'm going to select the new row of polygons that I've just created. So with those polygons now selected as a result of the bevel, now I can do spacebar, smart extrude, and again using the widget here and the small N symbol, click and drag to extrude those faces inwards. I'll hit escape and then Control D to drop the tool. And now we've created our first split of the main part of our prop. Next, let's look at the front section here and try to reproduce this section. So to do that, I need a few more polygons in this section here, in this row of polygons here. So I'm going to use my edges tool. So I'm going to select this row of edges here, and I'm going to say cut edges and select 4. Spacebar, connect, and then drop the selection. So that gives me some extra polygons to work with. So here now I'm going to select, as I did before, a selection of polygons to mimic what we have here. And I'll leave the other area of the nozzle part. So I'm going to just randomly choose some polygons now. So I'll choose some at the top here. Spacebar, smart extrude, and again use that N symbol, and now I get a much better result from my extrusion, which is essentially extruding along the normals of that original geometry that I selected. I'll escape and drop the selection. As with everything else, I'll just bevel the edges of this new extrusion here. So now I have those edges selected, I can hit the spacebar, bevel, and reduce that size down. Say OK. So that completes that section. Now let's focus on the handle part down here, and you can see we've got this small extrusion on the handle. Let's zoom into that area a little bit closer, and I'm going to select these polys around here, these edges around here, and then I have those 6 polys in the center. Again, same process. I'll use the bevel tool and I'll put in my same value of 0.07. That gives me that polyflow like so. And here what I want to do is I want to inset this new bevel inside. So we know how to do that now. I will use the polygon tool and select this loop, shift, smart extrude, and using the N tool here, it's just pull these ones inwards. Escape and drop the tool. So now I want to select these polygons that were left in the center, and I want to pull these ones out. So I'm going to change the tool to the transform tool here, make sure my local axis is selected, and I'm just going to pull these polygons out, and then I'm just going to reduce this curvature that you can see here in the polygons by clicking and dragging on this scale tool here for those polygons. It just flattens them ever so slightly, but maintains some curvature on there. I'll hit escape and drop the tool. Next, I'll select the edges of this new extruded geometry, spacebar, bevel, and reduce that bevel down to something like that. It just adds that extra bit of detail onto the handle part. Next, we'll focus on the handle. Now, I'm not going to reproduce this effect that we can see here because I can leave that to something like a normal map, because I need to recreate this slight arch in the geometry. So to do that, I'm going to select this point here. Let me make sure I've got my add and split. And I'm going to split across like so. I'll put some supporting geometry in there. So I'm going to click and split there and split there as well. And then I'll use select slide vertex tool here and just slide this one backwards here a little bit. With that done, I'm going to use my select edges, and then I will start to select the edges that I want to bevel. So adding that extra geometry in here just allows me to create that curvature of edges that I need to do the next process. Spacebar, bevel, 0.07, and say OK. I will now go ahead and select that new loop of polygons that I've just created, and again it's the same process. Spacebar, smart extrude, use the N symbol and drag inwards. Escape and drop the tool. Here I've selected the edges of that new geometry, and I'll just hit the bevel tool and just soften that with the bevel. And if I want to, if we zoom in, I can add an extra segment here just to make it a little bit softer for the handle there. And I'll do the same now for the other section around here. And say OK. Next, we'll concentrate on the top of the prop, but I need to create some more geometry in this selected area here. So with this ring of edges selected, I'm going to hit spacebar, cut edges, and use a value of 4. Say OK. And now I'll hit spacebar and connect. You'll notice a slight problem down here, and that 3DCoat, when it tried to connect, was connecting the wrong points together. So we just need to correct that now. So what I'll do is I'll use my delete edges tool and just delete the edge that's causing the problems. And now I'll just connect these 2 points here. And now I've got that loop all the way around. So if I do my selection, double click, you can see now the edge flow is correct. So with that done, let's select some polygons on the top to recreate this area that we can see here. I'll choose my select tool and edges, and I want to select, and I'm going to select some of these edges around here. We'll just bevel these. I'll remove the extra segment in there and just reduce this down 0.07 and say OK. So that gives me the loop that I need. Let's do the same process. Select that row, spacebar, smart extrude. We'll just push that one down like so. Escape and drop the tool. Next I'll choose these polys on the top surface here. Just brush selecting the ones that I want. Select the inner polys. I'm going to extrude directly upwards, so I'm going to just use the transform tool, commit an extrusion, and just go straight up. And instead of having this curvature on the top, let's do something different here, and I'm just going to use this scale and flatten those polys and hit apply. I'll just correct the size. I want it to be a little bit higher, so I'll choose that transform tool again with those polys selected and just raise that up slightly, like so. It's giving me an extra row of polys here that I don't want, so I'll just I'll choose delete edges, edge loop, and just delete that edge loop there. That creates this top part for me. So now I'll select this edge, spacebar, bevel, and quite a deep bevel on this one, something like that, and I'm going to add an extra segment in there like so, and then I just want to create something else on the top because it seems as if in the reference we've got some sort of extra area that's on the top. So let's do a different technique here. Let's just use this selection here, and this time I'll hit spacebar, inset, and I'll use this slider here to just inset those polys. Say OK, and again I'll do another extrude here using the transform tool, hit commit extrusion, move this one up ever so slightly. And instead of beveling this, what I'll do here is I'll just scale this one in slightly, like so, just to add a slight variation. And reselect those edges, and then I will just bevel those again. Something like that. So continuing here, we can see there's an extra piece on the top, so I'll try to just create some geometry for that. So I'll go along here, and this time let's cut in on here. So I'm going to need an extra piece of geometry actually. So I'm going to just cut across there, like so, and I'll do the same on the other side. And then I'll use the edges tool to select those edges, something like that. And same process, use the bevel. And I'll remove those extra points from there. So with that being done, what I'll do is go over to my select polygons. Let's select these polygons here. And let's just raise these ones up. Something like that. It's quite a small area. It's just a little bit of relief on the top there. And I'll leave the curvature of this one so it contrasts with the other. So the bevels we seem to be using a lot on here, but they are important because they do help to just catch the light and add to the complexity of the model, and they're fairly easy to do. Okay, so let's have a look here, and just to add a little bit more interest on this area, you can see we've got these two insets here. So let's do something similar on ours. So selecting those ones, and we'll choose inset on there, say OK. Let's check the other side, it's fine. And then we'll just do our transform, and we'll just create an extrusion on there and then just pull those ones in just slightly. Drop the selection. Maybe we can select these ones here. This one, I'm just going to Just scale this one in a little bit. See how that looks? That's fine. Let's do the same on this side. Okay, so the last part I want to look at is this area here. So to do this, I've got 2 points selected. I'm going to bevel those 2 points. Something like that, say OK. Then I'm going to select my edges that I've just created. Spacebar, cut edges, 3. And then I'm going to select the edges that I've just created. I'll do this side first. Spacebar, align verts, to create that circle, say apply, exit, and drop the tool. Let's do the same on the other side. Escape, and drop the tool. So that gives me the 2 circles that I need. I need to put some supporting edges in now to hold this circle together. So I will use my vertex points there and put some extra cuts in here. So I'll use the connect tool to do that. Now you don't have to do these ones that I'm doing here, but I'm just putting this extra support in there. Okay, so there we have the start of our detail on the side. So next I'm going to delete these inner polygons here. All I'm really after, and the purpose of this construction here, is just to get this rounded edge here to mimic the reference. I just need to now finish off this circle, and I'll do that just by creating some splits in the circle here. So I'll go down. Now I'll create a split across the circle here and do the same on the other side. And then I'll delete these ones in here. So I will choose delete polygons and I will delete these polys here. Same on this side. Okay, and now what we'll need to do is just to connect these up. But before we do that, let's look at a different tool here. And we can see here that I've got, let me change my selection to edges. You can see here that we've got this edge here. And what I want to do is use my split rings tool here and create a split along these edges here, and then I'm going to use that to match the geometry over here. But what if I needed this to be accurate? At the moment I could just eyeball this and it would work, no problem. But let's look at the measure tool now. So here we have the measure tool, and I'm just going to move over and zoom in onto this edge here. Doesn't matter about the measurement units on here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this tool and I'm going to click on this point here, and holding shift down I'm just going to measure roughly to where this point is here, and the value of this is 0.20. Now if I do use fixed length now and add that in of 0.20, I can come over to this side now and click on this point on the opposite side, hold down shift, and it will snap to that line with the exact same value. Hit escape. So now I've got a measurement, and if I go over to my split rings tool here, one thing just to remind is that when you use this on here, you have to include the option of show in other tools, or it happens where it disappears like it just does when I change the tool over to split rings. So now when I choose split rings, the measurement guides will remain on there. So now all I've got to do is just match that up and place my split at exactly the correct point. So let's move over now, and I'll just go back to the measure tool, and I will delete those two lines. So these are the two lines that are represented here. So if you notice when I delete them, they will be removed. And now all I need to do is go over to something like the quads tool. Let's do parallel and click and snap to this point like so. Same on this side. And for the top one here, I'll just eyeball this one and use my split rings tool again. Let's zoom in, just position it something like this on there. Again, back to the quads tool, snap that across, zoom in, it's struggling to find the point, and there. And if I use my add and split, connecting these 2 points, it will fill in that quad for me. Same on this side, and then back to the quads tool, and I can just fill in that one and that one. So now I've cut the geometry in to start to create the detail that I need. Now I'll choose my polygons selection, and I'll choose these polygons here like so. And what I'll do now is I will use my transform tool, commit an extrusion and push inwards. And what I'll do now is I'm just going to scale in the Y and scale in the Z just to create that kind of bevel on there. And if it's a little bit too deep, I can bring it forwards or backwards with the gizmo. Let's leave it there for now. And with that still selected here, I will now extrude back out again. So I'll go to my transform tool, extrude. Let's come back out. Let's extrude again. This time I'll shrink this one down a little bit, move it out, just scale it, the Z and the Y, and let's do one more. Something like that. Okay, so when we're looking at this now, we've completed all the main portions of our design, and we've used different techniques to create the extra details. Some of them, the majority of them, are just simple bevels and extrusions here. We're not really doing anything any more complex than that. The real difficulty here is choosing your selection and making sure that you have a selection that matches your reference in order to bevel and create these splits. So if you notice down here, we've got these extra pieces here. This I can add with a normal map, and we could also, if we want to add these bolts and things on here, we can do a little bit of kitbash on here and go over to our polygons, poly models section here. And if we've got some items that we've pre-made, so let's say for example I've created this object here, I can click on this object. It's a little bit large, so I'm going to scale it down. Let's move it out so we can see where it is. So, and I'm going to left click on this gizmo top and hit spacebar, and then type in 90 to rotate it in that axis 90 degrees. Still a bit large, so let's reduce that down. Let's go back to our reference, and maybe we could put it here, somewhere here like this. Move it inwards. So because I've not actually committed this as an object yet, it's ghosting. So I'm going to have to apply if I want to place it more accurately. And you can see here it's added an extra layer. And now if I select the contents of this extra layer and hit transform, you can see now I can see what I'm doing when I'm placing this, and maybe just place it in here, stretch it out. You can see it's quite a dense object, but it is UV mapped as well. So if you go ahead and create a library of these, then let's say, for example, you were making different modular pieces of this, you can reuse those elements and kitbash the same consistent pieces that it was made from in its construction. You're not restricted to just trying to make these elements all from the same mesh. You can actually use kitbash elements that you create yourself. So that concludes this tutorial, and in the next tutorial, the final part, we're going to look at polishing the surface of this object and sending that over to the paint room to just show some basic material editing that we can do on here. See you next time.